Time to replace the head on Fish Face? Here's your look at the Mattel Master Universe Origins Merman. Modernizing and celebrating the original 80s Master Universe action figures, Master Universe Origins gives you the power to pose Eternia's greatest warriors or retro-style figures, or in the new action-packed battle positions. What a better place to be than under the sea before we get a closer look at Merman with a brand new head sculpt. The first thing we're going to want to do, the first thing we always do right around this time frame, if you were to clock this in around this part of the video, we always do about the same thing here. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little bit shorter, depending on how more long-winded I may be. Let's not be as long-winded here. Going to take the tape measure, like I said, right to the very top of his head. Stop it right there. Merman version 2 is 6.043 inches in height. So unnecessary. The figure also stands 15.3, so he's about 15.5 centimeters tall. And because this is Merman version 2, I suppose it would make some sense to probably bring in the original V1 Merman, so you can see the difference between the two. It's more just preference than anything else. If you like it more based on the original vintage toy line, then the one to your left would be the one that you're probably going to be scoping out. If you like Merman more into this 2000s series where the head sculpt is more or less looking like, then this is definitely a superior looking Merman to be put on display. Let's bring out some other figures that you can display along with the new Merman. There he is next to Beastman, the boss, Skeletor. And just for no other reason, just put Ninja right in the middle. Ninja's good at really blocking off crowds like this. Kind of gives you, at least again, a good idea that even though Merman does sport a brand new, more considered updated head sculpt, the bodies are pretty much going to be the same to one another. Okay, let's see. Checking through the reviewing manual. Measurements, we did that first. Size comparisons, we did that as well. Chapter 3, here we go. Reviewing accessories that come included with the figure. Yes. To come included with Merman version 2, of course, it comes included with the same comic that came included with Faker. On the back, it advertises all the figures that make up this wave. Skeletor and He-Man get revisited here simply just because it's their party. They have to be invited after all, whether you like them or not. Fisto, Evil-Lyn, Merman, and Faker make up the rest. Fisto, funny enough, seems to be the unique figure from this release because all the other ones, in some way, shape, or form, have been reissues with something different done to them. Merman, it's not simply just a head swap. You'll see in a second there's a lot more going on with this armor. Evil-Lyn, I believe, is just a darker color, and Faker, for obvious reasons, is just a carbon copy to He-Man, though dropped the ball considerably when it came to his head sculpt. If you haven't seen the review of that, go check it out at your earliest convenience. Let's quickly have a look through the comic. I know we don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, even though, unfortunately, this is the international packaging, and though from this omitted is the dialogue or even any idea of what's going on here, sort of have to just use your imagination. If you have good imagination, you're okay. If you have poor imagination, I'm terribly sorry. I'm terribly sorry that you're going to just have to piece this together and figure out what's going on. Skeletor is there on the end, and it seems like he's produced many a copy of Faker. Stay tuned for that. At least I will say this comic is in much better shape than the comic that came included with Faker. The other one almost looked like it was attacked by a honey badger. You ever been attacked by a honey badger and you've survived? Consider yourself very lucky. Those things are nasty. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and put that to the side. The other thing that come included with Merman is, of course, the instruction sheet. Sheet being the obvious word because it's only really on one side. It tells you only the things that can be swapped about. Technically, I always feel like they should shadow the legs too, because it's technically the bottom half that you're popping out. But then I suppose they would have to then darken the boots even darker than that gray, and just things get too confusing with so many different shades of gray. Anyways, those are the things that can be popped and swapped around with this Merman and the other Masters figures that we've been collecting. So we'll discard this quickly into the recycling bin, which is actually not there. It's over there. It's over there. I'm going to have to throw that in there later on. To come also included with Merman, anybody wants some corn? We joke always about this when we see it, but yes, it's his corn cob sword. It's not really the name it's been given. Coined, I'm sure, by many fans. It is really a rather disgusting looking sword when really you break it down and look at the details done to it. It literally is a row with teeth stuck all into it. Whose mouth is Merman using for a sword? I would certainly like to know. Between the two, I think cobbed corn seems so much more harmless. I would rather describe it as cob-corned sword than some gnarly-looking teeth all wedged into. What is that, bone? That's disgusting. Somebody pass the butter and the salt. That's the way I like to have my corn on the cob. People that sprinkle Parmesan cheese on corn on the cob, I ask you, what are you doing? Why are you overly committing to this? Just quickly have the relationship with the cobbed corn and move on. Let's not get Parmesan cheese into the equation. Anyways, where are we going with this? You can take the sword, and you can fit it into his hand. For obvious reasons, the gripping hand would be the best one that you'd want to go with. And he holds it in his hand like this. So happens to be the same sword that came included with the version 1 Merman, though I know I didn't really bring it in for this review. There really isn't a section on the back that can house the sword, so you either have the choice of having it in his hand. Choice number 2 is you can somewhat slide it here in the back. Or choice number 3, you can just leave it alone and stop talking about it already. Jeez. Let's go ahead and take the sword out of his hand. We'll put it to the side. Let's get a closer look here at Merman. Now, I'm sort of torn as to how I feel about this figure. The reasoning why I say this is because I've been bought into the idea that Master Universe Origins is sort of based on the original vintage toy line. And what we're getting from that as a result of it is vintage characters with improved articulation. Well, we're not really necessarily getting that with this particular Merman. What we are getting instead is the later more 2000X series Merman design with a more vintage style body. I will definitely say, I mean, I'm not looking through rose-colored glasses. I can obviously see, as I've introduced now everybody, hello, this is version 1 Merman. You can clearly see that if you're somebody who's wanting just to get a Merman, and you're not so tied down to the idea of having to get a vintage figure, it's definitely, this is a much better looking Merman. I mean, come on, I'm not that oblivious. But I will say, though, again, if you're making this the Master Universe Origins line, I would have been content just getting this Merman. Although he looks more like a shocked cat that's eaten some sour lemons. The bodies aren't actually the same, although they are the same. Let me rephrase that. They're not the same in the sense that they're the exact same bodies and we're just changing out the armor and changing out the heads. And while the bodies seem to be the same, the V2 Merman, it actually has darker colored skin. You can see right there, it's almost got more of a bluish tint going for it, and less the teal that the original one is. Also, the gloves are different here as well. And I say gloves because they've actually painted these on and ledged them. They're actually sculpted pieces on top of the arm. So they have had to bring something different new to the table, whereas this one was just the regular arm and definitely didn't have the additional fin sticking out that this one has over here. Legs, when we look at them, are also very different from one another, not only just the color scheme, but the fact that also that they've sculpted brand new boots, something that the original one didn't have, going more the route of those monster feet that we've seen with many of the Origins figures so far. The armor piece, obviously, you can see there's a difference definitely between the two. There's more elaborate sculpting here on the V2 version of Merman. Somebody's like, please stop calling it V2 Merman. Okay, I'll stop calling him version 2 Merman. But the armor is different. The shoulder pads are different. They kind of look like they would be the same, but there's a wider fan on the original one than the newer one. And even on the back, you can see he does have the spiked collar, where the original Merman doesn't have that. I guess, again, it's one of those cases to pick your poison, which Merman you prefer, or, again, you could just be like me and pick up both of them. Let's just move this one over to the side for the time being. So, again, let's get a closer look at the head sculpt. Though it's not traditional Master Universe Origins Merman, I do say that I love the sculpting of the face. It's weird because when you look at it from the side, it actually looks like he's wearing a face mask, like he's going dressed up for Halloween. The back of it, as you can see, almost looks like, if I flip it around this way, it almost looks like the bottom of a clam. Clams that open up and, well, you know what clams are. Again, I do like the coloring. Problem I have with the coloring, though, more boils down to the use of the yellows. The yellows don't seem consistent at all with one another. The yellow, obviously, there in his gloves, match those of his boots. But then his lower trunks are a different yellow, a little more warmer, almost like a warm honey yellow. And even warmer to that is a much darker yellow that makes up the majority of his armor here, which can be removed if you wanted to. I wish that the colors were all sort of consistent with one another, not to mention as well, when you're looking at his face, it's even just another yellow. So there's about 4 yellows going on here when it comes to Merman. I like the sculpting of his armor piece. Like I said, it's a separate piece, and underneath that would just be your traditional master's body. I want to talk a little bit also about his boots. There's things I like about the boots, and there's probably things that you already see that I'm going to be talking about very quickly. The sculpt is good. I really don't like the paint. You can clearly see what they've done here is they've used yellow plastic for the boots, and then they've done their best to paint around the areas to blend better than with the rest of the colors of the legs. But it's not very successful. The end result is you can see the bleeding of the yellow plastic going through. It almost needed a second coat, I feel, to really make that much richer of a color. It doesn't then blend in with the rest of the legs, and it certainly more looks like it's painted boots than actually sculpted boots. Now, they couldn't have gone away from just having these as a sculpted piece that sticks out. They obviously will want to keep it close, and they will want to keep it to the rest of the molding of the boots. The paint is, though, really rough here. I wish that was just a little bit better. Paint on the gloves is acceptable, I will say. He's got a real awkward-looking finger. Somebody's snapped poor Merman's fingers. Even like his hands are a different yellow than the yellow gloves. These parts, of course, are a smoother painted piece. These here are just a molded yellow. I'm going to have to heat that up, I think, and bend that back into place. The yellow, again, is passable. In some places, it's pretty good. In other places, it looks a little on the rough side. And again, we spin it around so you can see it there on the back. What I will say, though, going for this figure is you definitely have a much better looking Merman. Whatever my feelings may be when it comes to the character and how I feel he should still look like his retro counterpart, I'm happy at least that they released him as a second version. If they had, say, released only this guy and decided to do away with this version of Merman altogether, I would probably be a little bit more upset, just because if we're going to be sticking to the idea that this is based on the retro vintage line, then yes, this Merman does stand out, and even though this one is much more the eyesore, this is a better looking Merman I feel you'd want to have in your collection. Tackling now the articulation on Fish Face, his head does rotate all the way around, though by the nature of the way that the collar is sculpted, you will be rubbing up against that every single time you rotate the head. It does move, of course, up, down, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. Traditional articulation also goes for his arms. You can bring them out at a very comfortable, easy to manage 90 degrees, and you can also rotate them all the way around. The figure does have bends in his elbows, although I will be honest, I haven't yet heated these up. They're really tight, and it almost feels like there's no give to these. So I will, after this review, take a hairdryer, heat these up a little bit, soften up the plastic, and have much more manageable elbows to deal with. You can see that they've sculpted them differently because this is a brand new forearm. Unfortunately, because it's a little more of a narrower piece, it's a little bit harder, I find, to bend that elbow. Don't force it, though, because if you have a figure like this in your collection and you have a really stubborn joint, take the safer route and, like I said, heat that up, or you can submerge it also in hot water. I'm going to do probably either one of those just to free that up a little bit. But he normally would have a bend in the elbow, and also to go along with that, he'd have the rotation in his forearm. The hands also rotate all the way around, hinging back and forth. Just don't like that. The yellow isn't the same. Waist swivels, traditional articulation going there. At least they left the gap between the top of the armor piece and the lower half of the skirting, where you can still move the torso back and forth. Even made a little curved shape right above it, so it lines up rather nicely with the belt. Legs split out. You can also bring the legs forward and back. He has a bend at the knee, lower rotation as well. The legs, oh, that paint's so rough. The boots also rotate all the way around. You can hinge them back and forth, and yes, you can ankle pivot them as well. I guess really the logic behind all these is that the Master Universe Origins figures isn't simply just going to be based on the retro line. I mean, so far what we've gotten in these figures have been vintage figures, or at least based on the original retro line. Merman now breaks the mold of that, giving us something that we would have gotten in that 2000s series. Unfortunately, it does result in the figure standing out, though. So until Mattel decides to release more of these figures outside the realm of retro lines, then yeah, maybe Merman would blend in better with that. If they don't, and this is the only time that we're going to get this merman. It's a nice looking merman, but it doesn't really fit in well with the rest of the Masters of the Universe Origins line, at least in my own personal opinion. In final looks here for Merman, I'm showing you the front of the packaging for something different. It's also to bring your attention to the letters LOP that you probably noticed at the bottom of the packaging at the beginning of the review and have been asking yourself this whole time, why does Merman have LOP at the bottom? Well, it actually stands for Lord of Power, a subcategory line that I guess Mattel is going to run with, giving us the character designs from like the 2000 series onward. Already there's advertisements of not only LOP Merman, but also an LOP Beastman. So that may involve, in fact, actually incorporating some much larger armor, because you remember that Beastman in the 2000 series had a more hunched over torso. It's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do with that. And the fact that they have taken the time to put LOP at the bottom of Merman, I feel like I'm saying LOD, like Legion of Doom, probably means that Mattel is going to split the line, still give us characters based on the original retro line, but then also expanding the line to give us those LOP figures as well. That's kind of exciting. I just hope that dedicated time is still going to be focused on the retro line, because that's really, I feel, what the Master Universe Origins line started to be with at the first place. It was characters that we had as kids, just with better articulation and maybe in a lot of cases better accessories as well. Merman on his own may seem a little out of place, but again, if they're going to be branching this off to give us more Lord of Power figures, then yeah, Merman makes a little bit more sense. Maybe we'll get a Lord of Power Skeletor, a Lord of Power He-Man, and, again, rinse and repeat. What do you guys think of Merman? He's definitely a much better looking figure. I mean, again, I'm not going to look at this and say, hey, wait a minute, I really like that retro figure more. I mean, obviously, this one looks like a better looking Merman. But for the sake of displaying the figures that I already have in my collection, the other Merman, even though it looks like a shocked cat that just ate something sour, he was the one that actually fits a little bit better with my collection right now. And for the time being, maybe poor Merman here, version 2, may sit off on his own until, of course, he gets the rest of his LOP buddies. What do you guys think of LOP Merman? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, if you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. We haven't wrapped up yet the Master of the Universe Origins figures. There's still more to come your way. If that's the kind of thing that you like to see on this channel, make sure you hit this video with a like and keep your Eternian peepers peeled, because there's definitely going to be a lot more content coming your way. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.